What would you do if you bought a house, one that you planned on renovating and restoring, but only to find out everything is not as it seems? We are rejoined once again by our very first guest, Mallory Hammond. She recounts her tales of living in a haunted house. A house so darkened that guests often would end up sleeping in their own vehicles in the driveway instead of spending the night in the house. A place so disturbed that it was seemingly trying to make her a permanent resident, no matter at what cost. So sit back as we enter through the spooky door. And welcome to the show. Today we have Mallory on the show with us.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Of course, you're here to talk about your amazing, horrific experience that you had.
It's amazing, but it's also horrific.
We're talking about the house, not the ex. The house, right? Yes.
We're talking about the house.
The house. Ex was also horrific. Got it. Yeah. The house. Okay. Wasn't sure which horror story we were just jumping into.
Well, they kind of coincide.
Right. I was just going to say that. I was like, they're kind of one in the same.
I feel like one energy brought the other.
I don't know about that.
I don't know.
Maybe magnified? Yeah,
magnified. But I feel like it was there.
Okay. So we'll set the stage. We're going to rewind the clock back to what, 2005?
2006, yeah.
Okay. So then you and your ex were looking.
House hunting.
Okay.
House hunting. And we wanted to find something just kind of small and cheap so I could bail if I had to. And we stumbled upon this only house for sale in Hilliard at the time. And it was this tiny little white Cape Cod that they had built all these ridiculous rooms onto. But the original house was actually the garage in the back. And we didn't know that at the time. But when you walk in, you can actually see where the kitchen floor was and everything in the garage. They just basically put a garage door on it.
Nice.
And left the tile right in the one corner and everything else, and then built the other house on the property, I think in 1941. But we don't know anything about the original garage house.
Whoever owned the house originally. And we should also say, Hilliard housing market is always insane and tough to get into. So the fact you were able to find a house there
at 18 years old was baffling.
But now you know
my price range.
Well, now you know why.
Now I get it.
You should have known there is a catch.
Like, good one, realtor. You got me this time because I'm 18 and blonde and dumb. So thanks.
Lesson learned.
Good for you.
Next time you're in that situation, you're just going to be like, so it's haunted, right?
Yeah. I see the recliner. Yeah, I'm going to pass. This is a solid no.
So we're jumping ahead here. Okay, so you guys get the house. When you first got the house, did you notice anything weird, or did you feel anything, see anything, notice anything?
Just viewing the house, I went back and viewed it by myself for a second time. And when you walked in, there was a twin bed in the living room, which was odd.
That's not creepy.
And you could tell it's like being slept in, like blankets and everything, and then a recliner, and that was all that was in there. Nothing else was in there.
The living room?
In the living room.
So it's completely empty except for a bed and a recliner.
Except for a twin bed and this ugly burnt orange recliner. So I'm like, okay. The rest of the house is fairly empty. There's almost nothing in the rest of the house. I'm assuming they were, in the process of trying to move her out. She was an elderly woman.
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought the same thing. I would have been like, oh, they've just moved everything out already.
Yeah,
right?
I didn't think much about it. And then they built 2 rooms in an addition to the side. And in one of the rooms was left exactly the same. Everything was in there, like a little boy's room. So I figured grandson or something is still visiting, and needed his own place, and they didn't want to change it to disrupt him. Like, okay, well, I didn't think, much of it. The house was just weird. Nothing felt bad, just it was a weird house. And I was like, well, it's a cheap, weird house. Now it's my cheap, weird house. So we went ahead and, bought the house. And when we go to buy the house, she tells us that she left the room the way it was because her son had died.
So wait, did you have a realtor, or did you buy it from, or was it son?
I had a realtor, but she kept coming to the house, the woman I bought it from.
You didn't know you were getting an
I didn't know I was getting her too.
Plus, plus a new friend.
Yeah, and she came all the time, like all the time. So she tells me that her son had passed, and I was like, I'm so sorry. And she's, we kept his room the same. And this woman's in her 70s or 80s. And I'm like looking at this little kid's room, like, holy cow, you have kept that room for a very long time.
Right.
But like,
That is a long time.
now as a mom, I'm like, okay, I grasp how that's a tremendous loss. Then I find out he actually had a heart attack at 40 just down the street. And I was like, so why did we set up said child's room for one son? Other son still living, room is empty. I was like, okay, well, all that's going, right? Like, not to be rude, but all that is going. It's
So,
not
like,
It's your
staying
house.
here.
Take
okay,
it
so
with
my
you.
question is the little kid's room. So she set it up after the fact. Was
I
this
have no
stuff like
idea.
that was his that she still had?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
it
So,
wasn't
it was
like-
all his stuff. It
so
was a
she
twin
still had
bed,
it.
furniture. Yeah. Like, and it was all still in the room, but it was the only room left alone in the house. And I was like, okay, that's not going to be my bedroom. Not doing it. So she did end up taking all of that, but left me the lovely orange recliner in the living room. And so after maybe 2 days of living there, like, we're still moving our stuff in because we live just down the street at an apartment, literally like 4 doors down from this house. So, you know, we could move slowly. We had
Wait,
a
were you guys
30-day
living in those
window.
like white condos or? Yes,
Yeah.
I remember that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was an easy move. So we just did it slow because we wanted to renovate the entire house. By we, I mean me. Renovate this entire house. So like the second day there, I'm in the house and I hear like a light squeak. And I was like, oh my God, floorboards or something. Because it was built in the 1940s.
Right.
So I'm like, it's just falling apart. It's fine. Everything's fine. So as I walk into the living room, they have the original flooring and you can actually see into the basement in the cracks. And I'm like, oh, I'm probably hearing, you know, stuff from the basement. But it's the orange chair just slowly rocking back and
Yeah.
forth.
She left you. The
She left
orange
me the chair.
She didn't leave it for
Thanks.
you.
So I was like, okay. And I'm, you know, trying to be logical. Like, I'm probably stepping on a floorboard that's causing it to move. And it just stops. Okay.
Like mid creek.
Just stopped. And I was like, okay, that chair's going immediately. So as I'm trying to haul this chair out, it's falling apart from where it's been, you know, sat in for years. The edges are literally just bowed out. And it smells like cigars. And I thought it's the chair that smells like cigars, but it's so heavy in the house. I was like, well, that's odd. So I ended up breaking this chair into pieces and hauling it out and getting rid of it. The next day I come back and I hear the creaking. And I was like, what the hell is that? And I go out and I can smell the cigars. And
On the chair?
The chair's gone. So it's just in the house now.
Does this
And
does this smell like old cigar or like freshly
No,
lit?
it smells like somebody's
Like
legit
someone's,
just
like-
smoking
Yeah,
a cigar.
like just
cigar.
lit up
Puffing on it and-
Yeah. And so I thought, well,
Because
maybe
there's a big
it's one of
difference
the
between
neighbors.
like lingering
like
cigar.
stale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
different, huge, different smell.
So I thought, well, maybe it's the guy next. I mean, the houses are 10 feet apart. So I'm like, yeah, maybe it's the guy next door, whatever. So Gladys, the gal I bought it from, comes back. And I was like,
Gladys.
Of course, her name is Gladys.
what's up with your chair? And she's like, that's my husband's favorite chair. That's where he would sit and smoke his cigar. And I was like, okay. And she was like, yeah, he literally sat there till he died. And I was like, cool. So dead dude in chair. I just hauled his chair out.
Now he's pissed at
Now
me.
he's gonna be pissed. I was like, fantastic.
And you broke it apart.
So yeah, and I had to like bash it apart. I couldn't get through because it was so bent. I couldn't get it through the door. And so that was our first thing. I mean, that was 2 days in, 3 days in. And I was like, what? I don't know what's
But the
going
ink
on with
hasn't
this
even
house.
dried yet on the contracts.
No. And unfortunately, it eventually did dry. So now I own it. And so that was our first, like, just moving in. And, you know, my ex didn't really believe in any of that. And I was trying to be logical because I was scared shitless of this house when we first moved in. And, you know, everything just slowly got weirder from there. Our dog was always barking, you know, at the walls. And I thought, squirrels or, you know, something like they get in and
Squirrels,
Right.
ghosts,
wreak havoc.
you
Like, who
know.
knows? And the weird part was he would, you know, growl at the wall, you know, face level ish.
And we should also like mention too that Tuna is like, you know, he's a very
So chill.
Yeah, he's the most chill dog on the planet.
That is the Bob Marley of dogs. Like he wanted nothing but to just like eat and lay
Sleep.
and be merry.
And laid his like blanket.
Yeah.
That he carried around with him everywhere he
Yeah,
went.
his blanket. His blanket. And he would literally just, which was weird. He never growled at anything. So I thought, oh my God, like I have a serious pest problem. Like something is going on.
That's-
But then he would get to a corner that was just windows. Well, squirrels can go through walls. They're not
Right.
going to get through, full windows or doors.
Right.
And he would just,
This is pretty early on, right? You
yeah,
said
this is, I mean, I had just moved in. So I was like, what in the hell is going on? And he would randomly go over to where the chair is. Like he would around the house and eventually get to where the chair was and just, and I mean, all his hair would stand up. And I was like, cool. So I have to get rid of that corner of the house. The chair was not enough.
Just chop it
Yeah,
off.
just
Yeah.
done.
I feel like at that point between the dog just randomly growling and the like cigar thing, I would have been like, well, the house is haunted.
Yeah.
Just gonna own up to it now.
This is just my life.
Okay.
This is where the point in the horror movie, someone's like, well, I just sell the house. It's like, well, it's easy to buy a house. It's harder to
Right.
sell a
Yeah,
house.
exactly.
It's real hard to
And
sell
you
a
can't
house.
just like, you can't just leave and go somewhere else because you still have like a house that you have to pay for. So you
Yeah.
can't afford to like do a whole nother thing.
It was awful. And I was like, you know what? I've seen this movie. Blonde girl dies first. Like, not doing
That's
this.
actually usually true though. That's
Right?
really
This was my conundrum. Like, I cannot stay here. Blonde girl goes first. I'm going to get pushed down the stairs or I'm going to get stuck in the garage door thing. Like, it never
something's
ends
gonna
well.
happen. It's gonna be like
It's going to be awful.
everything that I'd be like everything that I do in that house. I'd be like, there's a way I could die doing this.
Yeah.
Now, your ex at the time, what was his like thinking of? Did he notice anything? Did he think of anything? Or
He was
just,
very big on like, this does not exist. This is not happening. So every time I was like, hey, like, this is what's going on, because we work separate shifts. And I was like, I don't like being here, even to the point, like, not just being scared. Like, I just don't like being here. It all feels bad news. Every time Gladys comes, she tells me some horrifying story about that. It's like, this person died or this horrible thing's going on. And I'm like, no
Well,
wonder.
didn't you talk about how the neighbors complained about them fighting? Like
Yeah.
her and her husband?
Yeah, all the time.
yeah.
So like after she moved out, the way they spoke, she spoke, it always sounded like, oh, my husband and life was bliss and yada yada and great with my son. Turns out the neighbors like, oh no, they fought like cats and dogs, like all of them. It
I
was
was gonna say,
constant.
didn't she fight with her kid? The kid?
Yeah. So, it was all bad.
Maybe that room she had set up was some guilt.
That was my
Maybe.
thought. It's like, finding out he
Well-
passed away at like 40.
Or
What
maybe
in the
she knew
world?
like he was back.
Well,
She's
maybe.
like, I gotta appease him.
Or maybe the other thing too is like in that situation, if someone moves out pretty young, if there's a bad place and he's like 15 years old, it's like, I'm getting the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe at that time, maybe the room was just like whatever. So
But again, maybe that he did move out early, and
Yeah.
then when he got older and passed away, maybe there was some guilt there. She was like,
right,
shit.
because
Yeah.
that would explain why maybe the room was never touched, because if he moved out,
Well,
pretty
no,
early
remember she
on-
said it was touched. She just set it back up.
I'm assuming it looks like, I can't believe she kept it like that for 40 years.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it sounds
So-
like.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
maybe she put
obviously
back
we don't know
together.
for sure, but from what you're saying, that's almost what it seems like. is
She's so
maybe she-
crazy. I
Who
can't
knows?
decide either one of those. So I'm like, did you keep it the whole time or did you freak out and set it back up again?
I feel like from
What's
what I
happening?
know about this story, maybe the second's more likely, like that she just like flipped out and was like
Yeah.
obsessed about it and was like, I have to set it back up.
And then I know that his room and his brother's room were additions. So those weren't even there. So I don't know when those were built, but they were much newer than the rest of the house. There were 3 additions added onto this house.
Maybe she built it just for him.
So I was like, so that became the office I never stepped foot into.
Oh, geez.
It's like literally it just kept boxes the whole time. I hated being in there. When you walked in, there was green shag carpeting that was like, 2 or 3 inches long. And inside it was fishing hooks and live ammunition and needles. And I was like, okay, well,
I still
I don't know what to
like,
do with
I'm
this.
still like in my head, like trying to figure that one out. Because I remember like
Yeah.
you told me that like before. And I
Yeah.
was like, how? Just
Yeah.
all that various
Oh, I know.
like objects. It would make more sense if like it was like stuff that was related to each other, but it's just like this
No,
array
it's
of
just
like
shit.
Yeah,
All
that's
kinds
just
of
like
weird stuff. And so finally I
It's
was
like
like,
fish hooks,
nope.
weapons, like just an live
Yeah,
machine.
like-
yeah, and it would
actual
also
needles,
make it would also
like-
make sense if you like picked some like if you bought some house that at some point like wasn't being lived in and like okay,
yeah,
maybe
like there was a
people
squatter.
right, there's a
Yeah.
squatter in there or something, but it does not make any sense that like she was living in it
Yeah.
and that she also clearly took all this time to like make sure this room was like always kept up, but there's
Yeah. And everything was
what
like
in the
that.
carpet, like what's going on
once
here?
we started tearing down walls, there were bullet holes, live ammunition inside the walls, like spent ammunition that had been shot into the wall. So it was new drywall in certain areas. And I was like,
Crazy.
well,
Maybe they were
Just to patch
shooting at
up.
each other.
I don't know. Like it was just a bunch of weird stuff. You know, every time I tried to remodel something, there was always something I found that was like, well, that's odd, you know, and it was just a weird house. You know, even we asked the neighbors, like, you know, have you guys been in this house? Oh, we don't go in that house. Cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
Super glad I bought it.
That's that'd
Yeah.
be like a little alarming to me. Like if you don't go in it, there's obviously a reason you don't go in
Yeah.
it. It
Is
sounds
it Gladys?
like you
Is it the
Whoa.
ghost?
right. It sounds like maybe you know something I don't. Can you tell me what that is?
Well, I never like when I would go over there. I don't know, we talked about this before. Like, no matter what you did in that house, it was always dark.
It was always
Like-
dark and it was always cold.
Like, no matter what you did, no matter like what lighting, how much lighting there was, no matter how middle of summer, like it didn't matter. It'd be like it was always dark in that house and super cold. So
Yep.
many cold spots. I remember I spent the night in the house one time, and I still don't know how I.
Most people don't. I
don't know
had
how
some
it-
like bigger bands. I don't know if you're allowed to like mention bands,
No,
but I
whatever.
had like a Ghost Inside came and stayed at my house. Like you can go and buy them on the front of AP magazine, and I'm like, y'all slept in my driveway.
Yeah.
Wait,
yeah.
one.
You
So-
you tried to sleep at my house.
Yeah, go. You have to explain this a
Try.
little bit. Yeah.
So I used to, you know, help promote shows and stuff like that and just go to shows. And a lot of the people passing through didn't have a place to stay. Well, I was living there alone at the time. My ex and I had split. So I was like, well, you guys can come stay. I have a pretty rad work schedule. So, it doesn't
Not
matter.
gonna mention that it's haunted.
So, yeah. So, and at that point, I'd been living there for a couple of years and for almost a year of it by myself. So I was like, well, okay, I can survive it. You know, you start to forget. And just,
Right. You
Yeah.
just forget how bad it is.
Hi, Gladys's husband. I'm going to work. Don't burn
See you
shit
later.
down. So, they would come over, make dinner, whatever. They'd sleep and then head back out on tour. And, people came over and they're
These
like,
are other
"This-"
bands too. Like, you got a lot
Yeah.
of
Oh,
stuff,
there's 2 or 3 bands at a time.
Yeah.
That would stay a whole tour would come over. Big hardcore guys, tattoos, piercings, the whole bit, and then just little old me. So, they would come in and they're like, this house is weird. Or did you hear that? I'm like, yep.
Yep, I
yeah.
know.
I'm like,
I
you're
know.
good. You're good, man. And so we got to talking about some of the weird stuff that happened in the house. And I'm like, my perfume bottles are always empty. So I quit buying them. I was like, it was expensive. I'd wake up and, they'd be empty. Like,
Was it always perfume bottles or other bottles? Like any fluids?
Mine was always perfume. I
Okay.
never had anything else that was missing. It was always perfume.
That's so weird.
Yeah, that is
Or if
weird.
it was, I didn't care about enough to realize it was missing.
Okay.
And the perfume is the expensive part.
So it's
you
always-
take my
so
Clorox,
obviously,
fuck
yeah,
you.
like, and I feel like too, like for like, I can see that as being something like you use that on a daily basis, pretty
Yeah.
much. So you're
Right.
gonna notice, like,
Well, and
this
if you
was
steal
not,
my hand
yeah.
soap, you're just an asshole.
right?
Like,
Come on now.
why?
So it was always perfume that was always emptied out.
Yeah.
Do you wonder if maybe like they were intentionally like, this is expensive and like,
I don't know if it was like a thing, like it was something they liked, or if it was something that, like, I wish you would really quit wearing that. My ex-wife wore that, or like what
or
the
I just
issue
want to
was.
smell good.
Yeah,
right.
like I'm trying to cover up, cigars. So like, let me hit up your Burberry.
Yeah, like I need this.
Okay.
So anyway,
So-
going back to the band.
We taped it. We taped the lid shut and we left it on the counter for the night. I went to bed. Like, I live this. So I was like, whatever. I wake up. It's a motherfucking graveyard. There's no one in my house. And I was like, wow, they left early. I mean, it's like 7 a.m. And I was like, okay, cool. And I go out and start making my coffee and the vans are in the driveway. And I was like, did you all go for a brisk morning walk? So I get my coffee and I go out there and, on the van, they're like, holy shit. And I'm like, oh my God.
You're actually in there.
And I was
Okay.
like, what are you
Didn't
doing?
expect that.
And so, they're like, we're not coming back inside. And so they were like, we heard things move all night. We heard people talk all night and your perfume's gone. And I was like, so one of you wore my perfume? And they're like, no, it's taped shut still. And I was like,
I know.
okay. I was
Yeah.
like, so this is like what we were talking about last night. This is my life. Like, I'm going to work. Y'all have a good
Yeah.
day.
Jeez.
And so that happened on more than one occasion that, people came over and were like, we can't stay here. Like, we're going out for the night or, I'm going to sleep in your driveway in a van.
There's only one person I talked to who was not weirded out by your house. Justin.
I don't think he's weirded out by anything.
He just like I was talking to him about it, and I was like mentioning like you were gonna be back on the podcast, and I was like, yeah, didn't you ever? He's like, no, man, I never felt anything. I didn't.
And I feel like even if he was scared, his poker face with that beard is so solid.
You
Like,
wouldn't know.
you'd have
You
no
wouldn't
clue.
know.
He was the only
No.
person that I've ever met who was not phased by your house.
He could be in full panic and go, oh, that's scary. And he's going to be fine.
Right.
So,
And you would also be convinced
Yeah.
that
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't that
Because
he wasn't
I remember
scared.
I went over there and I didn't even know about it. I didn't know you were experiencing all this crap.
I didn't
And
really tell a lot of people because otherwise they don't come over.
Well,
Right.
how do you just tell that? Like in randomly you're out having drinks with your friends. So hey guys, everybody's talking about their day. Oh,
Just so you know.
Well,
my perfume's gone again.
so I didn't really know you were having all these issues. And I remember like, I went over there and like I was crashing over. And I remember how it was like you, me, and a couple other people or something like that. We're all hanging out watching a movie and like people were leaving and stuff. And by that point in time, I didn't have a place to go. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to go to bed. I'm like, you can't leave me in this room alone.
You're not the only person that's been like, sleep on this couch.
Right.
You do not leave my eyesight.
I was like, nope.
Don't feel bad. You're not the only grown man. At least you stayed in the house
Right.
and not in your car in the driveway.
See, if that was me though, I would be like, I don't know. I feel like I would be scared to stay in the house, but my other part of my brain would also be like, how do I know if I go outside it's going to be any different?
and then
And
outside
then
you're
I'm also
alone.
right alone, and then I'm exposed to also strange people that might be outside. So I don't know. I think my logic would have kept me in the house. But
Yeah.
I guess this is just me.
Well, that was like the weird part about like, when my ex was still living there, he always said, I don't hear anything. I don't, nothing's going on,
It's on your head.
It's in your head or it sounds like, everything was logic. The floor is creaking, and
an
I was
old
like,
house.
okay,
It
I can
settles.
appreciate that. It's a,
Right.
it's a 65-year-old house at this point. So like, okay. And the windows are the drawstring windows. So, I mean, you literally can hear often people outside. And one night, he came home real late from work and I was standing in the kitchen and he hears a laugh. And he goes, you hear that? And I said, yeah. And so he legit gets a baseball bat and starts walking the outside. The house is like 3 a.m.
Oh, shit.
And he was like, there's no reason there should be kids outside. And this little boy keeps giggling. And I said, yeah, I know. I've been hearing for days.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah. And I was like, I know. It's always, when I come down and get my water or whatever. And he's
I
like,
like how his reaction to hearing a little boy in the middle of the night
was a fucking
I was
bat.
like, I'm going
Baseball
to beat
bat.
this child with a bat. Like, is that where you're going to go?
I don't know. I was like,
There's a reason why we call him asshole.
I was like,
Right. I see it.
I was like, I can appreciate the keeping the house safe, but
From the child.
from the child. And so we hear this giggle and he goes, I heard it that time. I heard it. And I was like, I know. And then you hear a woman say, shh, you're scaring them. And I was like, and I'm done. I can't do this. And he goes, I can hear that. And I was like, I know.
That's what I've been telling
Yeah.
you.
And
It's
so I
like-
was like, holy shit. And that was the one time that I was like, okay, now I'm actually scared because there's people
Right.
that don't, think that this could possibly happen. And they're going, that's weird. I'm like, yes, I know. Like I have
think
Yeah.
like
goosebumps.
it would also scare me too to
Ugh.
know that like okay now it's gone beyond me just hearing it, but it's
Yeah.
also like it's acknowledging my presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which that would freak me out. Like
That's what
even though
scared
it's
me.
not acknowledging like your presence in like a malicious way, it's still like it no like
Yeah.
I'd be like nope, mm-mm,
Yeah, that was the one that like that got me. After that, I was like, I can't do this.
So what did you do
all
after
the
that?
time?
Like,
Well,
because you guys still lived in the house for quite a while because you guys were
yeah,
together at that point, and you
yeah.
still lived there for a while after you guys.
We lived there for probably another 6 months before him and I split. And then I lived there for almost a year by myself. And, there was just, it was constant, just small things. Like it just slowly added up, to those types of things where like, I know I can hear people talk. And then I'm like, am I going crazy? Because I live here by myself at that point. I'm like,
So how long did he live there for? About a year and a half?
maybe a year and a half.
Okay.
We only had the house for like 2-3 years. We didn't have it for very long because the housing market collapsed, and we had just
Well,
split,
yeah,
so we couldn't sell it. So I ended up living in it for a year while we're trying to sell
So
it.
the reason why I crashed your house was because I was driving to LA and my van died, and we had to go back to the mechanic shop and get it fixed. So I was waiting. So I was like in limbo for like 2 days, and that's when I came over and hung out.
Oh, you just didn't have anywhere else to go.
That's literally it. I literally was like, I was waiting.
I would go anywhere. I would have slept at UDF instead of going
Right.
to my house.
I would have found something.
Well, I came back to Columbus, and I was like, "Hey, I'm in Columbus." You're like, "Aren't you supposed to be going to LA?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in Columbus. Our van died."
Come stay at this haunted house.
That should have been a
I'll
fair
stay
warning.
in the cheapest, dirtiest Roach Motel.
But I remember this because we moved to LA the summer before the crash.
Yeah.
2000.
And so
terrible timing, but
unfortunately, when we go to sell it, we can't.
yeah.
No one's buying houses, and definitely no one's buying a rickety ass haunted house. Like, every time we tried to fix something up, something else happened. Or
What did you talk about? Like you were doing some work in the kitchen.
yeah, so I remodeled the entire kitchen. Actually, moved the stairwell from inside the kitchen to the living room that went down into the basement. And as soon as we took down walls, there's more bullets. There's it like insulin needles or medical needles.
I just can't
And I don't know why they're in the wall.
Like was it like a fountain that just kind of poured out?
Oh shit, poured out. The one center wall. Like, and the weird part was there was a bunch of peanuts that came out of the wall. So I'm like, cool. So now I have drug addict, gun toting squirrels apparently also in this house.
I can't like.
The only thing I can think of is it's the son upstairs, who's probably a POS, probably throwing trash into a hole in a wall and just like shoving it in there, just kind of hide it, and then it kind of trickled down into the wall.
Maybe
like,
that would
below it.
explain like the needles too. Maybe that was part of like the issue with like the
Yeah.
family
Maybe he
was
was
there was some
hiding.
drug use and he was trying to hide it.
I have no clue. So when we're remodeling, we ran into like a weird stud. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I can see, above why things aren't leveling out. So I come up the stairs and I'm trying to look, and I'm like, oh, there's another wall. It's like a weird Cape Cod, but there was a little access door about yay tall, like a tiny little weird door.
A little like,
And I was like,
crawl space for storage.
yeah. So I was like, okay, well, whatever I need is behind that. So I was like, well, I'll just go in the storage unit and see if I can see everything. Even if I have to bust some drywall, we'll figure it out. So I open the door, and the door has claw marks, like a dog has just gone crazy trying to get out of it. And I was like, what the hell? Who would put a dog in a thing this small? I mean, this place is only this tall and about yay long. It's tiny. The house itself was small, so any storage space is going to be even smaller.
Right.
So I start trying to crawl into it so I could see, what was going on. And at one point, they had insulation blown in. So there was a piece of wood that had been screwed into the drywall and the studs where they had removed the drywall, blown the insulation.
Is that the studs you were hitting in the kitchen?
And put it back. So I was like, well, maybe that's what's going on is, whatever they did, they didn't do it right up here.
Right.
And I start looking and it's wallpapered. And I was like, why the hell would you wallpaper a storage room? And it's little like cowboys on the wall. And I was like, well, that's odd, but whatever. And the rest of the house is weird too. So just pile this on. And so I'm looking at the access for the HVAC, and they have shoved like a curtain rod in and bent the curtain rod trying to pry this thing open. And to me, it's like, why wouldn't you just unscrew it? And then so I started looking at the scratch marks and I thought, oh my God, somebody's been in here. Because I thought if it's a dog, that's one thing, got stuck and like door shut behind it. But somebody had enough logic to shove a metal rod in behind this thing and try and pry it open. So anyone who had enough logic would have just opened the door. It doesn't lock from the inside. So you could have just left unless it's being blocked from the outside. And then at that point I was like, I don't know what's gone on in this house, but I'm done.
I feel like that's the thing
How long
that
you
would
lived
have.
there at that point?
Oh God. Maybe 4 months.
Okay, so this is pretty early on.
3 or 4 months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we were
feel
just
Like, I
like
remember
remodeling.
you telling me about that, and I was like, and I think I went up there and just saw it, and I was like,
That's the part like I think would have bothered me the most, because I feel
Yeah.
like, you know, putting all the information together, it doesn't need to be said
Yeah.
what was probably going on there. And
or maybe there's a reason why the kid moved out when he was young.
right.
Yeah.
It's absolutely horrifying, like that someone like was doing that, and it's obviously, you know, you don't know, was it one of the kids, was it
a
both
brother?
the
Like,
kids, like
you know,
what was the
I have no
reasoning,
clue.
why were you doing that, was it like a punishment, or you just doing it for kicks, like, but you know that like that's what was happening, someone was being shut in
Yeah.
there and they against their will. And
So like word started getting out about my house, you know, when people wouldn't say it, and people would literally come over and, you know, can I see the cowboy room? Come on. And then I'd
Help
take 'em
yourself,
upstairs, and
right?
I'm like, here you go, weird little door. And everyone's
creeped
first
out?
react was
You
like,
happy?
holy
Yeah.
shit, that's really small. And,
Yeah,
yep.
it's fucking weird.
Yeah. And there
It's
was
really
like
weird.
the little army men, you know, there's a couple of those in there, and that was
So there's
it.
toys in there?
Just those, like those, and I think there was like a jack or a marble or something. There wasn't a lot in there.
yeah, it bothers me too, I guess, is like, you know, I've just worried too, like, how long do you think that, like, was it, you know,
Yeah.
because you don't know if someone's mentality is like thinking that they can do something like that, then, you know, I wouldn't put it past somebody to be like, yep, you know, days, you know.
Yeah.
So how long did you live there before you really realized, I'm like, okay, let's get out of here? Or you've been trying to get out so much, like almost after a while, shortly after you got
I
it?
wanted to sell it probably like 6 months after we got
As soon
it.
as Gladys starts showing up.
Yeah, she came
Was she
by
showing up all
daily,
the time still? Even like, how
Oh,
often
yeah.
would she show up?
at least once a week.
What was she
Like we'd
talking
sit out
about?
back and talk.
What is
She would just bawl. She would just bawl about things that in her past and her family, and a lot of times it wasn't coherent. So her sentences didn't always, you know, make sense.
Right.
So I did a lot of like, I'm so sorry, you know, patting, hugging. Hey, are you okay? Want some sweet tea? Like,
Because didn't you say she had to sell the house due to money, right? That
yeah,
was the
she
issue.
couldn't stay there anymore. It was all she told me. She couldn't stay there anymore. So I don't know if she can afford it or mentally it was too much of a burden to try and take care of the property because it was an acre.
Well, yeah, I remember the backyard was beautiful.
It went forever.
Because your neighbors were not too far from each other, but like your backyard just
It
extended.
was 6 of us landlocked, and each of us had an acre.
Yeah.
So they were long. They were thin, but they were really long. I mean, the houses behind us looked this big.
I actually have a lot of fond memories of like the couple times I went over there. of, like,
Backyard
us-
was
yeah,
fantastic.
we had like a couple cookouts. I think it was 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was
I
like-
had the big grill and everything. Like people would come over, they just didn't want to come in. So like,
Right.
they would hang out outside. But then, you know, once we talked about selling it, couldn't sell it. The housing market crashed, and you know, I hadn't done enough remodeling to make it worth
Right.
a while.
We started
So-
to try to remodel it, something else would show up and be messed up.
Yeah, so it was
So, I mean, that
just-
sounds about right.
Yeah. So I go to sell it. I can't get anybody to buy it. So I end up short selling it for less than I bought it for after putting, you know,
Money.
a lot of money into
Which
it.
I'm
whatever.
sure you're at that point just like,
So this
Fine.
time, yeah, I was literally like, I told the realtor, I said, I will sell it to the first person that take it. I don't care what they want for it. Take the keys. Like, you know, whatever. So I find out we sold it. I was like, oh, thank God. You know, I never have to walk back in this house again. Yada, yada. Gladys bought it back from me. So the same woman I bought it from bought it back. And I was like, why would you want this house? Like, why would
that's
anyone
so
want
creepy.
this house?
That's so.
Yeah.
So I left some things in the house not realizing I did, you know, and she called and said, hey, do you want to come get your stuff? I don't want to throw it out. Yeah, I'll come get it.
Well, that was nice of her.
Yeah. So I go back to get my stuff and I walk in the house and I kid you not, the foundation had collapsed in on itself and the house cracked like along the wall like this around the entire
It's like a
edge
new.
of the house.
It's like
Yeah,
a new
it,
and she was back.
It fell in.
Well, what?
Did they you think they just didn't want her back?
I have no clue.
So what-
But I mean, the house was like
What about you, like, having
Nope.
to crawl over some water or something like that? You talked.
Oh yeah, so the basement supposedly never flooded and the stairs were dry rotted, which had I been any older than 18, I'd have been like, you sure? Like
Right.
only from, the fifth step down dry rotted, not the whole staircase. So I was like, okay, fine. So we had a flood and the sump pump went out. There is a ridge around the edge of the wall this big and it's freezing cold water. It's the middle of winter. So I'm like, okay, well, I have to get in this water to get down to the sump pump to try and kick it on to get it to start pumping water
Right.
out. But every time I got close to it, the power would kick back on. And I'm like, the power is off. Like, I don't understand why this is happening. So every time I went to touch the water, the power came on. And I was like, fuck this. I'm done. I'm done.
So every time you try to reach for the sub pump, like the water,
The power, the
and then
power
it would turn
came
back
on.
off.
I feel like that would be
Which-
creepy, but also extremely frustrating.
It's horrible because I'll get electrocuted.
Right.
So I'm up on this. I'm perched like a cat on this 3-foot thing, trying to get down into the water just enough to kick it on. And I'm like, okay, but I've shut the power off. So I don't understand like why it keeps coming back on. So finally I called a buddy and I was like, this is going to sound crazy, but can you and your girl come over? She stands at the breaker and you and I go down on this fucking ledge and you lower me into the water to turn it on. And that ended up working. So as long as somebody was standing at the breaker, power never had a problem. And I'm like,
So it's almost like something. There was like really, really bad wiring, or somebody was like
Yeah.
sitting there like switching, on and off or whatever.
so I called my buddy Keith, who has a handlebar mustache, because when you have an old house with electrical problems, you call a man with a handlebar mustache.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's how you fix this. And I called him and he said, the board's old. Like, don't get me wrong, the board's old, the wiring's old, but there's no disconnect here. So you shouldn't have theoretically had a problem. He's like, I've traced it as far as I can see it both directions. He's like, now granted, there's some areas I can't see. He's like, but odds are, like, you just had a fluke. And I was like, this whole house is a fluke. I'm like, okay, well, thank you.
If you could see through the boards in the living room, could you see the water?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had to live like that
God.
for almost 3 weeks before I could get somebody to
That
come help me.
It's terrifying.
It was super weird. So like,
It's like
you
the house
have
is trying to keep you there. It's
a
like
wooden
trying to
floor.
Right.
Make
They're
you a
like,
part
we'll
of it.
kill her
And
and,
make you-
she can never leave.
It'll smell like Burberry all the time.
Right.
join us. one
Maybe
of us.
that's why they were taking your perfume. They're like, we're going to take this. We're going to save it for her.
I'm like, oh my God. So like I had to live in the house. And at the time, like after my ex and I split, I was trying to pay for everything by myself. And so like my gas got shut off. So I had no heat. So it's middle of winter. So like I have this freezing cold water below me.
I was
Tuna
going to
and
say, and that's
are
making
l-
it worse.
Yeah, are
jeez.
laying like on the couch in a blanket with an electric heater, like trying to stay warm in this house. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy.
This is how I die.
Yeah, I was like, this is it. This is it. So I was just like, no matter what I tried to like do in the house or fix in the house, there was always something like slightly weird or just off enough that people are like, I don't know if I want to work on it. Like, well, I can come help you remodel, but our concern is we start bashing in these walls, you have a live
Right.
ammunition in your wall.
Right.
If it was spent shells, it's just metal. It's
That's
not
so
going to hurt
weird
anything.
too.
Right.
Like I like the revisiting the theory that the sun was maybe dropping stuff and like okay, so the
Yeah.
needles and stuff makes sense, but the live ammunition in that theory does not make sense to me. Like, why would you just be
But you said
dropping?
you said you
Well, as a
found
gun
bullet
owner, why are
holes.
you wasting it? Like,
Right.
What are you doing?
Why?
It's
Like that's my
expensive.
thing. Why? Why are you why are you throwing that in there? The needles
Yeah.
make sense. That part does not make sense.
You
to
said
me.
you found
Yeah.
bullet holes in the room too.
And,
right?
and
Yeah,
I
in
would
the
feel
kitchen.
like I'd feel like too anybody that did have their hands on live ammunition would know enough knowledge about it to know that the risk of putting it
Yeah.
in the wall like that.
Well, you know this. What
But-
kind of gun was it for?
I don't know. Maybe
So
I'm
they
wrong.
had 22 and 45. But we found shells for like rifles too.
So that's
So,
even weirder
but
too. Like it's like a
The
Mixture.
rifles weren't live. It was just
mixture,
shells.
just the shells.
Yeah. So
Which
So
is
the-
weird too that some are live and some aren't.
Yeah, so everything live was for like a smaller handgun. But my thing is if I go sawing into something or
Right.
trying to tear it down.
You're gonna hit a freaking 22. It's
So I go, to throw a sledgehammer into it, and literally live ammunition pours out. And I was like, cool. So I just hit a whole patch of like 45.
again, it's like the house is just trying to keep you there. It's like, is this trying to like?
I don't want to
Okay.
stay.
Let's just
I'm going to
clarify
pass.
what we mean by keep you there.
Yeah, it's like I was like once.
It wants to murder you.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass.
Yeah.
That's a
So crazy.
That's a solid
though.
no, Gladys.
I just I don't like. I just can't make the connection there of why there's live ammunition in the wall. It just
everything
there's
there
nothing.
was weird.
The needles and syringes. I can get to the okay, maybe that's what was happening, even though that's really
Yeah.
far fetched. That's kind of
Right.
far fetched, but I can at least like process that there is some type of explanation that could make sense, even if it's a little far fetched. But the live ammunition thing, I was like, there's no situation or scenario in my head where I'm like, okay, this is A, B, and C. That's how that could have happened. It just it doesn't make sense.
Well, like people put junk inside walls all the time. They put
Right.
old Coke cans. They put photos.
Right.
They put all kinds of shit, just trash. Like as they're building the house, you'll find old cigarettes, old beer cans, whatever.
Especially if a teenager is trying to hide shit.
Yeah.
Or like the people building it, the construction workers, like find shit all the time. Like you take down a wall and you're like, oh, an old beer can,
yeah, right.
But live ammunition
That
was
one's
odd.
that's the one that
So
just
I'm
I'm
like,
like, I've
Why?
never.
So
like-
then it made me afraid to like take down any wall in this house because I'm like, I don't want to go barreling in and either get stuck with a needle or,
right.
hit a 45 with a hammer and have it
Oh,
ping.
geez,
Because
yeah.
then the other thing
wall.
about the needles is like you don't know where that's been.
I
So
have no clue. And that's
Right.
what freaks me out about them being intertwined
Was it
in
like
the
a syringe
carpet.
needle? That's
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Okay.
like medical
Yeah.
medical syringe
So
needles.
I ended up
so-
taking the shag carpeting and cutting it and rolling it and just throwing it out like in one whole section. I wasn't even going to risk like cutting it into little sections. I literally
I'd be afraid to
Seems
even do that. Just get stabbed
all
by something on
intertwined.
carpet.
I was like, no. Well, that's because I can't pick it out, so I had to just get
Right.
rid of all of it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'd be afraid even to just to do that.
Yeah.
I'd be afraid to
I
get
would be
stabbed
like,
by
and that would
something.
be like so like because like I'd be like I can't even set foot in this room because I'm gonna
and
step
none
on
of the
something.
other rooms were like that. That was the weird part. Was the only
Yeah,
room.
that's the thing I
Yeah.
like was also weirded me out that like, and it was also like it's just so weird to me the whole situation that like it was the only room that was like that, but it also so happened to be the room
yeah.
that she had kept
Yeah, right.
up on, like the one room that was clearly very important to her, like was the room that was in.
So I don't know if it was like just untouched, like she never touched, just put the furniture back or left the furniture. For all I know, like that room hasn't been touched in decades. I have no
Yeah.
clue. But it was weird. Like we had other rooms with shag carpeting. There's regular house stuff in it,
Right.
fluff and dust. But
Well, if it had shag carpeting, it's probably from that 70s. So at least it had
Yeah.
to be for like like that had been installed probably in the 70s because that's when they were starting doing like the shag carpeting. So
So I have no clue like why they did anything the way they did it in this house. They had all kinds of weird renovations and add-ons, and the kitchen, the whole living room was an add-on. It wasn't there. The kitchen was the original living room, and then the sunroom or whatever was behind it was the kitchen. And so there was a big window when I opened up the wall. There was a big window, and that's where the bullets were on the side of the window that were actually like embedded in the window. And I
oh
was like,
jeez.
okay, so
I would still be too curious to like learn like the original houses you stayed was the garage, like learn
Yeah.
exactly what the history there was too, like who lived
Yeah.
there,
Right.
like what went on there, like
I
does
couldn't
that have
ever
something
find.
to do right
Yeah.
like does that have something to do with why things are the way they are?
Yeah,
There might have been something in the Hilliard Library.
because that's what I'm wondering.
There
Because
might be
like,
some. Well, they've libraries have all gotten rid of all their like paper trail shit. It's all on the computers
So I've
now.
actually researched this though because I wanted to do it with my
Your current house.
my current house because it's fairly old. There's a way, and I forget the steps, but there's a way that you can go request information.
see, that would be rad
on a
because all I
house.
have is the
I don't know,
second
like if
house
it might
bill.
Right.
cost you some money, to do it, but still, like,
if you're that interested at this point.
Right,
That
like,
was so long ago. You might just want to be rid of it.
But yeah, I think you have to like, I can't remember. I think you have to go to like your
It's
city
trying to lure me
hall
back.
Right.
or something like that. Like I remember I researched it and I don't remember all the details to it because it used to be that you could just walk into a library and you could
Yeah.
find that information. But now everything's gone like technological and the internet, and it's so now like there's a whole process where you can't do that. I think like you have to like the way I researched I think is the way you have to do it. You have to like request it, and I'm not sure if you have to have like I'm sure if you request information for like a property, they're going to want to know why.
Yeah.
They're not just going to hand it to you. So I'm sure there's like steps that you're going to have to do to,
I know.
get that
Well,
information.
If anyone knows how to do that, just send us an email.
Yeah.
And then don't go to the house.
Right.
Right.
Because
Don't go. Because I know the other house was built in 1941, but there wasn't anything before that.
So you have the garage and you had the main house.
Yeah, in the garage, when you walked in, you could see on the floor where it was split into 4 sections, and you could see they still had the linoleum where the kitchen
Right.
used to be, and the kitchen door, and
Well, I
all the
mean,
windows.
The whole area where it's at though, those are all like pre World War II and then like post World War II. Like it's right around
Yeah.
that era.
So they've got the track houses that were all built in the 1940s, like
Right.
World War II. So they just built them cheap, and they built the exact same house. So every house on the street was the same until people started, renovating.
right, modifying
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. And that's what she did with this one. It was just one modification after another, after another, after another.
I will say I did see the most recently when it was up for sale, and there were like pictures on like Zillow. I did see the wallpaper upstairs, the like hideous like yellowish. It was
Yep.
still there.
It's still there. I never
and,
changed
yeah,
it.
and I was like, yeah, wow.
I
This is
literally
I mean, they've
did
they've
not.
renovated the
and you could
house.
tell though it was very like old,
Oh, yeah.
and it was like original wallpaper, and it was like it's like this yellow. It's like
Yeah.
this gross
The
color.
only-
it's gross color.
Only room that I touched was the kitchen. I touched nothing else.
That kitchen was so tiny.
Yeah, the whole
was
house was
so-
tiny.
yeah, the
the
whole house
bathroom
was.
upstairs was all at an angle. So if you were over 5'8",
Yeah, no, I remember.
couldn't
yeah.
stand.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. I remember like trying to like.
Biggs had to pee bent
Yep.
over.
I remember because I hit my head.
Everybody did. And then it had a fucking lantern up there as a light fixture.
Oh, jeez. The house-
So like
house
me
was
at
weird,
5'3",
man.
I'm gold.
Right.
And then there was only a bathtub because you had the bathtub, but then everything was angled like
Yeah.
this because it was tucked into like a little nook. So my dad and I ran plumbing to install like a shower head so I could have a shower, but the shower would almost spray the other wall because it's like
Jeez.
it was like that. So everything in the house was just built strange and never touched.
You almost wonder though if that probably maybe wasn't the original bathroom.
Who knows?
I have no idea.
Who knows?
I was going to
Gladys.
put a second one in downstairs,
Gladys.
and I was like, I'm not putting any effort into this home. I am living here until I can get the hell out of
Right.
it. Which is really, like in Hilliard, a landlocked 1
Yeah.
acre downtown Hilliard. I mean, it's
well, near downtown. Yeah, it's off of.
Yeah.
It's off Jeanette. It's over by where like Kroger and stuff is. So it's
So-
a nice, really nice area, especially now. Jeez.
everything else selling is,
Yeah.
selling for quite a bit, but not the house.
Right.
Right.
Like,
So talk about your last night there.
so towards the end, it was pretty quiet. I had moved my TV and everything out, so it was just me and Tuna. With it being up for sale, I had to keep it, completely empty so that people could view it at any time.
Right.
Right.
So Tuna and I were sitting having Chinese food on the floor, and he
Sounds
starts.
romantic.
Yeah, it was. I love that dog. So he started growling, and I was like, "This again, awesome." So he goes to the edge of one wall, and he growls, and then he slowly starts walking and following it like this, with his fur all up, and I'm like, "Holy shit!" And he goes to the window and starts growling, and I'm like, "Is there somebody at the window?" I mean, it's dark. It's 10 o'clock at night. I got off work super late every night, so I'm like, "There's somebody like walking around my house." So I get up and I start following him, and I get my phone, and he's growling all the way to the front door, and he stops at the door, and I'm like, "Holy shit!" And I'm like, I can hear somebody. So I call the police, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but there's somebody at my house. Like there's somebody here. And so we end up walking around and the cops were like, we don't see anybody. There's nobody here. And so Tuna and I are just trying to like settle in. And I realize like some of the sounds I'm hearing, I'm like, this is inside the house. This is not outside the house. Like, sometimes you hear car doors shut and stuff like that. And I'm like, nope, those are all inside. Like the touching of the window. I'm like, that's inside my house. So I was like, I'm done. I quit. And I ended up moving in with my mom for the last 3 months that it was for sale. I was like, I will take having to be a grown ass adult moving in with my mom over living in this house.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
win,
right.
Jeanette.
Yeah.
I give up.
I love how we just named the house.
Yeah, just the Jeanette house. That's what
Yeah,
everybody always
that's
called
what
it.
I called it.
Looking back on it, do you feel like maybe there was like from when you moved in to like when you left, like the progression of things like slowly get maybe like from okay, this is just like a little bit of this and that to like okay, it's becoming malicious now, and like there's some type of intention to like come after me personally?
Before, like when I first moved in, it all seemed like childish.
Right.
Like I would hear the little boy laughing or something would move or my perfume would be gone. Like it was an annoyance.
Right.
It wasn't scary. It was just annoying. Once I got rid of the crazy chair, the cigar smoke was annoying, but it wasn't scary. Hearing people talk, it was never like, menacing.
It
But
was
then,
it was just like hearing someone like talking in the next room, but your house
Yeah.
is by itself, so it's not like there can be somebody in the next room.
exactly. So I'm like, well, that's weird. And I couldn't always make out what was being said. So it was just like, okay. And then you start thinking like, am I actually hearing it? Like, cause once you live alone for a while, you're like, I'm just talking to
Right.
myself while I
Right.
make dinner. Like, oh, okay. And then as like, it went on, like Tuna started with the growling and it was all the time. He would growl at the window and growl at the door. And
Which is funny to me because I can't even imagine Tuna growling. Like
Right?
that's that's what blows my mind. Like I've never seen a dog ever do anything. He's the type of person that, like an intruder would probably come and be like, "Hey, do you have treats?"
I like how
Yeah.
you just said the dog was a type of person.
he was.
He was.
I mean, I understand that. That's how
No,
one
but
of my cats.
Tuna had so much
There's a
personality.
personality
Yeah, he
that-
had so much personality. It's like that's all I can think of. Yeah, he was the type of dog, like literally, like if like someone broke into the house, he'd probably be like, "Oh, do you have treats for me?"
Yeah.
So
well,
like I can't even fathom that dog even growling.
and that's the part that bothered me, especially when I was living
Right.
alone, was like he was scared and like, what are you afraid of? And it wasn't like a fear like, ooh, he was growling. And slowly like it would make its way. And the one time he was growling and he came and he started growling at me. And I was like, what? I don't know what's going on. And, so I'm freaking out. Like, what did I do? I'm scaring him. And so I go to step closer to him and he leans like this. He goes, "Arr." And I was like, holy shit, it's behind me. Whatever you're freaking out about is behind me. And like, I remember being like, I can't do this. And I called my friend Rosie and I was like, I'm coming over. I cannot stay in this house. Like, I'm done. I don't know what it
Poor
is.
Tuna had to be there alone when you were at work.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Tuna
looking back, do you ever like
feel horrible.
right? Like, what did he like see? Because obviously they
Yeah.
can see things and sense
Sense
things that
things,
we
yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what did he have to go through? Like, what kind of distress did that poor animal have
I
to
know,
go through?
trust me, like the guilt of like,
Oh.
oh my God, but it just got to the point that it was, it was becoming more of a nuisance. This isn't annoying. Like I'm not sleeping. Like,
Right.
this is a constant, stuff is constantly coming up missing or,
Trying to murder me.
or like, I'm like, okay, well, this is now dangerous. Like I quit.
So house is back on the market now.
And I pity whoever buys it. P.S. I hope you don't run hardcore
Well,
shows because they're not going to
didn't it-
stay.
Didn't it sell last time?
I don't know who she sold it to,
Right.
but I know it's sold again.
Yeah.
You wonder if other people are like, they have to be. They have to be getting all this stuff. And you almost wonder if that's why it's been
Yeah,
selling.
and it's selling cheap. I mean, if you look, shit houses in Hilliard are going for $200,000 at least.
Right.
If you're looking at it, it's like 112.
And
was
it's
like-
and it's also in Hilliard's like school district, and it's in like
You have
prime.
an acre. It's landlocked. You
And
could
it's-
demo the fucking house and build a gorgeous house on
But you
an
wonder,
acre.
like, if you demoed it,
Yeah, no one's done that. It blows my mind.
maybe
the land
people
is
are
worth
afraid
more
to
than
demo
that.
it.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I don't know. That's probably that'd be worth more money to probably to demo it than to try to rebuild that
So
house.
that was my goal, was to just make it livable and then demo the house, get rid of it. And I was going to build a new house on the
Aren't you glad you
property.
didn't know? Because who knows what that would have led to? It would have been like freaking Poltergeist the movie, and all of a sudden,
Horrible.
like, there's like skeletons.
Or you may
No,
have
I'm
just
kidding.
released all the energy and then it would have been fine.
Right.
'Cause it sounds like it's. It sounds
I'm
like
not
they're-
willing to gamble on that.
Right.
And I'm a gambling
Because
lady.
it would, you know, like it would be one extreme or the other, where it would be no in between.
Based on my prior experiences, I'm going to take the like shit's going to catch on fire.
Well,
like that's going to
That's the
be
feeling.
that's going to be my luck.
At least now it's like you guys had some weird shit happen to your guys' house now, but at least now it's like everything is hunky dory.
Yeah, and like the stuff that happened in the new house, like it happened just as we moved in, because of course I bought an estate sale, so I was like, who else wants to kick the bucket where I want to live?
Right.
That made me sound very insensitive. I'm sure she was lovely. Sorry, Mrs. Tony. It only happened like right as we first moved in, and none of it was like bad energy or whatever. It was
Right.
it was very motherly. Like
Yeah.
everything that happened was
Well,
very motherly, which she had 2 sons.
right.
And I was like,
Maybe she
thought
just wanted to make sure before she left, like
everything was settled.
Yeah.
These people are
everything's
decent human
okay.
beings.
They're good. They're happy. Everybody's taken care of. I can go.
So I had Grayson, and he was maybe 6-7 months old between that and a year when we bought the house. And I would carry him like this, and I'd talk to him, and we were headed up the stairs, and this house is super dark too. And I got up the stairwell, and it's a very small landing. It's pitch black behind me. And he leans back and goes, "Hi, hi." And so I spin around, and I'm like, who are you talking to? And he goes, "Hi, lady. Hi, lady." And I'm like,
Oh, cool.
Oh,
Yay, you
great.
got another-
Awesome.
more people. Outstanding.
At least this time it wasn't anything bad or malicious.
No,
it
like-
was just like
Grayson looks super happy, and he would just randomly, "Hi." I'm looking over my shoulder. Who the hell are you waving to?
But it's gone now.
Yeah.
Like,
We haven't had any problems. Like even in the beginning, I was watching the baby monitor, and this woman in a robe leans over the crib and leans back. And that was it. And so I go running in, and he's sound asleep, nothing. And I was like, holy shit. So my husband gets home. I'm like, I know this is going to sound nuts. Well aware. I took my meds. However, there is a woman checking in on our child, like in a bathrobe. And at the time, we didn't know anything about the people we bought the
so
house
you
from.
didn't know,
Yeah.
like, at this time. So
No.
that would make me like that. I think that explains the freaking out, because you don't know who this person is.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about the people.
Did you at that
All we
point when
knew,
you're like, okay, I don't know who this is, but I know what it is?
Yeah, so we knew it was an estate sale when we bought it, and we knew her son sold it to us, but her son was in such poor health that a representative came to the signing. So I never met anybody who actually owned this house. And I was like, she was in like an old style like bathrobe, and she had curly hair, and she was African American. I was like, that's all I could tell from leaning over the crib and coming back. And I was like freaking out. Turns out Mrs. Tony was African American and had curly hair. And so I talked to one of the neighbors, and I was like, okay. And they're like, she was really nice. She was wonderful. And I'm like, cool, because she checks in on my kid. I was like, awesome.
Did you tell your neighbors that?
Yeah.
Oh, what'd
I
they-
told the
what'd
one
they say?
neighbor, and she was like, well, that's odd, and they're very, very Christian. She goes, okay. And I was like, cool. They're never going to talk to me
Yeah,
again.
yeah. They're probably like, we're never gonna talk
Awesome.
to the neighbors again.
Okay. So she thinks I'm crazy. Outstanding. So glad to be in a
Way
new
to
house.
make friends.
And so my husband is, very like, I think open to things, but if he
Yeah.
wants to believe his own eyes. And he was like, I'm not discounting it, but I've never had an experience. So we had just moved in, haven't even unpacked boxes or anything else. And we had one of the angel monitors that goes under the mattress, and it senses vibration of their breathing. Breathing stops, an alarm goes off, but it's plugged into a wall with an AC adapter. So we're trying to sleep, and the alarm goes off, and instinctively I freak out and go running into would-be nursery, but Grayson's asleep in our bed. So it's like, what the hell? And it keeps going off and it wakes my husband up. So he gets up and we're both looking through boxes. And I'm like, this is nuts. So we hear it over here and then it moves. So then we start going through boxes over here. And he's like, what the hell? I can hear it. I can't find it. We finally find it and it's going off, not plugged into anything. Just the pad, not plugged into a wall. Pulled
Maybe
it
she
out
was
of a
just
box.
testing it, like, you know, like she wanted to make sure like this works.
I love Charles explaining that story because he's just like one of those people, like everything has a reasoning and
Yeah.
factually, and he's just like, I got nothing on that one.
He's like, I don't know. It was just weird.
I don't know. It was weird.
So like she eventually
This
like
is like that was weird.
so to your knowledge, she eventually left though, right? She's
So
not-
we started remodeling immediately. And I was like, great. I can't wait to buy another old house that someone's, kicked bricks in, and I'm going to remodel it. And then things are going to go crazy again. I was like, so excited. But this time I have a child involved. So I'm kind of panicked in the back of my head to start tearing this house apart. But it was weird. It was like, as soon as we started remodeling and we were trying to make the house better and just
Making
playing
your
with
own.
Grayson, he'd wave, hi, and eventually I just started going, hi, because I'm like, what the hell else am I going to do?
right.
Well, it's not malicious. It's not
No.
evil.
I
It's
feel
not
like
bad.
yeah, that
So it's
scenario, if
like-
it hadn't have left, I would have been like, whatever.
Yeah.
And it
Like
was weird, like-
you're cool. Just that's
Yeah.
fine.
After we just started acting like, hey, this is fine. Like, you can stay, Miss Tony. It never happened again. Nothing happened again. And it was weird. Then the house felt very empty. And I was like,
Huh.
that's odd. Super glad alarms aren't going off and ladies aren't checking in on my kid.
Well,
But
yeah,
But also
But
you're
it's
kind
that
of
positive
like,
energy is like missing.
yeah. And I
you're
was like,
kind of sad.
it's kind of weird. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, what a bummer. Well, then I found out like her relationship with her sons turned out not to be like the greatest people. But apparently she was very nice, like
Oh, okay.
wonderful. So I'm wondering if like she stuck around to make sure that people moving in were like good parents and like a happy family. Because
Right.
like as soon as we started remodeling the house and like living in it, it was weird.
She was
Like,
probably like, all right, cool.
nothing
I'm
ever
good.
happened again.
This kid's safe.
We've never had another incident in the next 4 years.
Perfect.
Like nothing. So I'm just finally found the house.
It's not all
Nothing
creepy. and
creepy.
dark. Now you jinxed it.
Yeah.
Freya
right,
doesn't growl
right.
at anything weird. Grayson doesn't wave to nobody.
Started out a little bit questionable, but okay. We got like a stamp of approval from
Yeah.
her, so she left.
Thanks, Miss Tony.
Well, we want to thank Mallory for being on the show today.
Thank you guys for having me. I
Yeah, of
appreciate
course.
it.
Thanks for coming.
Listening to
Thanks
my
for coming.
crazy story.
So, if you guys have any crazy stories out there, you can send us an email at, info at whatever the email that's down below us. info at thespookydoor.com. For you watching the video, you can always leave us down in a comment section. Also on our website, thespookydoor.com, we do have merch. We have some coffee mugs, t-shirts,
Hoodies.
hoodies, yes, all kinds of fun stuff. So
Hoodies.
if you want some Spooky Door swag, just check out spookydoor.com. Once again, we want to thank Mallory, and join us next time through the Spooky Door.